Hello again, it's Matthew here from Matthew North Music, and if you're new to this channel or a regular viewer, then if you haven't already, please think about liking and subscribing to this channel. If you hit the like button, it helps people see my videos, and if you subscribe, then you'll be able to see more of what I do. And if you hit the little bell icon as well, then that will notify you of any new videos that are coming up. Anyway, today I'm going to be talking about records, and I don't normally do a lot of these talky videos. I've probably only done about 3 or 4 since I started the channel, but today I went into a record shop, and that record shop is the only one left on the high street, HMV, and I have been quite critical on my social media and my blogs about their pricing, because a lot of records in shops, but particularly HMV, are just too expensive. There's reissues of old albums, and they seem to be retailing between 30 and 50 pounds. And some of these albums, they're not even, double albums or box sets. We're talking about a single album reissue. And I feel personally that is just too much, because you're not getting anything for your money, really. And also, you could get a classic album, like, I don't know, a Seth Stones album from the 70s or 80s, that they are charging £30 for. I mean, one example was the Undercover album from 1983. They've currently got that for £27.99 in HMV. Well, you can go onto Discogs and you can buy a mint first pressing of that same album for a tenner. So what are you paying for? Well, you're basically paying for hype. And this is the thing. So much new vinyl has been hyped up. And I think now the bubble is really starting to burst, because when I walked into HMV today is actually Christmas Eve, so, might not be a typical Saturday. But there were people just looking through, but no one was actually picking anything up. Now, at the door, as you go in, they had a sale rack. Now, I like a bargain as much as anybody else, so I had a look through the sale rack, and they, based on their own prices, they were genuinely reduced. Now, when I was a teenager, I used to go to the HMV shop in Exeter in the Guildhall, and their sales used to be great, because effectively all the big albums of the previous year would then be reduced by about half. And I remember one of the albums I bought in there, so this is like January 1986, is I picked up Meat is Murder by the Smiths for £3.99, because its original retail price was £6.99, so it's about half. Now, I went into HMV and I bought an album. Yes, I paid extra for the carrier bag, because I actually quite like record shop carrier bags, and it's an anniversary carrier bag. I will keep this carrier bag with 3 or 4 others that I've got. Well, it's one regret in life is I never kept old carrier bags. I wish I'd kept a Tops Records carrier bag from Newton Abbot. I wish I kept a Caterpillar carrier bag from Exeter. I wish I had a Destiny 1 carrier bag. All these shops I used to go into, I wish I kept the bags. But you don't think of it at the time. Anyway, so it's this album here, Muswell Hillbillies by the Kinks. Now, this is from 1971. And funnily enough, I've been reading Dave Hepworth's excellent book about music from 1971. And it definitely was a golden year. And I've never heard this album before, but I was watching YouTube a few months ago, and as an advert, they'd made a promo video for one of the tracks. I can't remember which one it was. I think it was 20th Century Man, actually. I think that was the name of the track. Anyway, they made a promo video for it, and I watched it as an advert, and I thought, that's a really great song, and I thought, I wouldn't mind hearing that album. Now, this album originally retailed at £27.99, and it's been reduced to £17.99. Now, that to me, sorry, £15.99 even. So that to me is, that's a fair discount. But then actually, I think £15.99 is really what this album should have sold for in the first place. And that's the thing. When vinyl records were starting to become popular, and we're talking probably 10 years ago, I remember going into HMV and I forgot what it was. I think it was the Arctic Monkeys album AM, which was a particularly big seller at the time. And it was retailing on the shelf for about £14, £15.99. And some of the other more popular new artists on vinyl were bands like the XX, the White Stripes, or anything to do with Jack White. And in fact, I do feel that Jack White is one of the people who is kind of responsible for the resurgence of vinyl, because all the White Stripes stuff came out on vinyl, and they were generally cut very well, and they were, you know, a lot of them were coloured vinyls and things, and they weren't too expensive. You could, in the mid-2000s, you could buy any of the White Stripes albums for about £12, £13. Whereas now, I said, an album from 50 years ago, nearly £30. Now, I would never have paid $27.99 for this, but as it's Christmas and it was $15.99, I thought I'll give this a go because I wanted to hear it. But anything above that, I think anything above £20 for a new album, I kind of think it's pushing it. And there's a box set that came out recently, which was the Now That's What I Call Music. They've been doing these box sets of CDs. There's like 4 CDs in a box, but then they sometimes do a vinyl counterpart, and that's normally got 3 LPs in. And the 3 LP version has less tracks, and it sells for between, I think, about £30, £35, something in that ballpark. And they've done another one, which is like a compilation of all the tracks that didn't make it onto the vinyl versions. And they've done it as a 5-disc box set. And that's retailing for just over £90. Now, it's basically an 80s compilation album. You can buy tons, you can buy the original Now albums in second-hand record shops for no more than £4 or £5. Sometimes you can pick them up for £1 a pop. And it's the same tracks. So to have 5 discs, yeah, they're coloured vinyl, that's quite nice. It's a nice looking package, but it's nearly £100. And to me, that is just too much money, way too much money. But then we move on to another level of these new vinyl records that is just, I think it is Emperor's New Clothes, and that is the world of the audiophile pressing. Now, I've been watching a few videos on YouTube lately, and they've been about audiophile pressings. And you basically see a middle-aged man, or older than middle-aged man, older than me anyway, sat behind a desk with all their records behind them, all neatly laid out, and they're waxing lyrical about some new audiophile pressing of some LP. And usually their videos start with a shot of their, you know, £20,000 turntable and their £40,000 speakers. You know, we're talking all this top stuff. Anyway, they pull out an album, and it could be a reissue of, you know, something like this, you know, Miles Davis's Kind of Blue. This thing's probably had more audiophile pressings than anything, because they just keep churning them out. Because, you know, there's this select group of people, there's probably only about 2,000 or 3,000 people in the world. That's why they do these at such small runs. And, you know, they've got to have the latest recut from the master. It's always from the master tape, and it's always the best sounding album until they do the next one, which is the best sounding again. And this is just a reissue of Kind of Blue. And this retailed for £5. You could buy this in the newsagents for £4.99, because this was the loss leader for a series of albums that D'Agostini did, where they just picked up classic jazz albums. It was like a subscription service. You pay them some money every quarter, and then you get sent an album a month. You don't get any choice in the album, they just send them to you. But I know a few people that did buy this set, and they were mostly very pleased. Now, I picked this up for £5 because it was £5. And I've played it, and it sounds all right. Nothing really particularly bad. Until I play this CD. And this CD absolutely knocks the spots off the LP. And the reason is that A Kind of Blue is a very long LP, and it has to be cut at a low level to fit everything on the records, because the louder a record is, the more groove space it needs. So Kind of Blue has to be cut quite quietly. And because of that, you do hear surface noise and rumble and stuff. And, you know, it just sounds a bit quiet and a bit muffly. That's how it's cut. You know, this isn't going to be, you know, the actual plastic it's cut onto. These are direct metal mastered LPs, which means it's, you know, it's just all automatic. There's no one there on the cutting lathe listening to it and making adjustments as you go along. But, you know, the LP sounds all right, and you shove it on any record player and, you know, you hear a kind of blue. But you get the CD just sounds better, because what they've done, they've taken the original master tape, they've digitized it, they probably have fiddled around with the EQ and whatnot, but to me that sounds really good. Now, this is the thing with the audiophile. As I said, these people that review these records, they're all of a certain age, which means they also have two things in common. One good, one not so good. The good thing they have in common is that they've obviously spent a long time listening to records with that kind of technical thought, and they're really tuning in for certain things to pick up on that your average listener would probably not even notice. They would just listen to the album and enjoy it. But the other thing is, when you get to a certain age, and I'm really talking probably starting when you're about 30, you start to lose the top frequencies of your hearing. It doesn't matter how well you protect your hearing, it happens, it's part of life. And I did a hearing test with a signal generator program on the computer. Anyone can do it. You just go to YouTube, listen to an audio sweep that's got the numbers, and stick a pair of headphones on. And when you can't hear it, look at the number, and that will tell you the top range of your hearing. And for most people, kind of between 50 and 60, you're not going to hear much above 15 or 16 kilohertz. So, and that's why I think streaming is seen as the norm now, because most MP3s, streaming audio, compressed audio, they throw away most of the audio above 16K anyway to keep the data size down. And if you can't hear it, then, you know, for a lot of people, that's, you know, they don't care. That, you know, they just hear the tune. But anyway, so you can't really hear these frequencies. So how can you distinguish between, you know, the latest UHQR, or whatever they're called, audiophile pressing at 200 quid, or a Dio Agostini that costs you a £5? And, you know, make that a bit fairer. Say your latest audiophile, as opposed to the version that, you know, CBS, Universal, whatever, have released properly mastered. And I cannot see there's going to be a huge amount of difference. I really don't. Because if it's a standard LP, then you've still got the same limitations about how you cut the thing. And, you know, whoever masters the audiophile pressing, yeah, there's all this talk about, oh yes, they've taken a digital recording and pressed it to vinyl. Well, that's how most albums are done. You know, they very rarely are albums do they have the original mix down master tape on a machine going straight to a cutting lathe. That just does not happen for many reasons. One of the reasons is, particularly with a lot of albums on Universal, the master tapes simply do not exist anymore. Universal had this massive fire in, I think, 2008 that they tried to hush up, where hundreds of thousands of master tapes burnt. So we do not have these anymore. This is why a lot of these audiophile pressings are from, some of them were actually cut quite a long time ago because the tapes don't exist. For the tapes that do exist, the standard practice is to do a high resolution, this is the key thing, high resolution transfer. So a CD is normally 44.1 kilohertz sampling rate like this. Well, that's how it ends up. And that's how a lot of digital recordings were originally made. But they will do a transfer that may be up as high as, you know, 384 kilohertz. You know, real, you know, the sampling rate is so high, it's, I would argue, better than just going from one tape to another, because you've got much more headroom. It's, you know, Shannon's sampling theorem is that if you sample something at twice the highest frequency the human ear can hear, then you cannot distinguish the two. And I think for 99.1% of the entire world, that is absolutely correct. Most people will not be able to hear the difference. And again, a lot of this is all people doing it with their eyes, seeing what's written on the cover, looking at stuff on computer waveforms, rather than just listening to something on a hi-fi system. So if you've got an album that's had a proper digital transfer and it's been properly treated in the mastering on whatever computer program they're using, i.e. hopefully not putting too much EQ, not putting too much compression, just trying to keep it roughly as it is, and then you cut from that to, you know, a decent cutting engineer, your sort of Bernie Grudmans of this world, they cut the record and then that then gets pressed around the world. Now, the main difference between that and the audiophile version is there'll probably be someone different cutting it. The chances are they'll be cutting it on probably the same cutting lathe, and they'll be making the same lacquers. The audiophile pressings will come in a nice fancy box. They will have nice fancy inner sleeves. They probably do make more of an effort to make sure the plastic that the record's pressed in is of a better quality. Now, you could argue what difference does the quality of the plastic make, but I would say that if the plastic's been recycled, it's going to have impurities in it, and that will quite probably cause more clicks, bumps, thumps, etc. So I get that. I certainly get the whole using better quality plastic. And the whole issue about heavyweight or lightweight vinyl, well, I've got some Dynaflex records from the 70s that are very, very wobbly, but they play great. But I can also see that if you've got heavy vinyl, then obviously it should have less surface noise in theory because it's more dense and it's less likely to warp. So I kind of get that. But are you seeing, you know, £150 audiophile pressing to a £20 on Amazon version of the same album? Are you hearing a difference? And I really don't think you are. I think it is all marketing and it's all about making money. Now, that isn't to say that back in the 70s and 80s when mobile fidelity and people first started, because back then, of course, there were so many more vinyl records being pressed and they were being cut all over the world. Record companies would just send out tapes to different countries and then they would just cut it from the tape. And yeah, you might well get some bad cuts, bad mastering. So you compare that to the audiophile, but stuff that's done now, because, you know, there's only half a dozen record pressing plants in the world anyway. There's really not many. The UK has its first new one in decades up in Middlesbrough, which is quite nice. But as I say, the LP, it's what it is, and you are limited by how it's made. You know, it's a piece of plastic. It has metal, melt and plastic pushed into a piece of metal, and that's how all records are made. So it is going to be pot luck as well, whether you get one that sounds great or one that sounds awful, because, you know, if when the record's being pressed, there's, you know, the presses might not close up completely together or something like that, you know, you can get errors on records. Whereas with a CD, whatever you think about CDs, they are consistent. This CD or one that was made, you know, 100,000 discs later, they are going to be identical. And that's the great thing with a CD. They are consistent. And a lot of people say, oh yeah, but CDs can rot, CDs can... I've owned thousands of CDs. Literally thousands. The number of CDs I've had that don't play, maybe 10 or 12. And that's usually because they've either got wet. You know, I've bought CDs at car boot sales, taken them home, looked at the disc and it's got bubbles on there because it had been kept somewhere damp. So yeah, they can rot, but an LP, you can just scuff it or scratch it and that will immediately affect the playback. You know, a CD with a small mark on it, it'll probably still play fine. So this is just, you know, this is the end of my little chat really. And it's just to say that there are so many ways to consume music and enjoy music. And I really don't think you should get bogged down with what version of an album should I get. And, you know, you could spend hours on the Steve Hoffman forum, you know, reading page after page about, you know, something like Miles Davis's Bitches Brew, and everybody's got an opinion on it. But at the end of the day, if you buy an original pressing LP of anything that you like, and you look at it in the second-hand shop, if it doesn't have any scratches on it, doesn't have any marks, chances are that's going to play just fine. And you could probably pick that record up for between £5 and £10 most of the time, most albums. I'm not talking about rare stuff, I'm just talking about bog standard LPs of the past. Whereas if you were to have bought that in HMV, you could be paying £30 to £40, and if you were buying an audiophile pressing, you could be paying upwards of £50 to maybe 200. And is it worth spending all that money? My argument is no, it isn't. The packaging may be nice if you're into aesthetics and you like nice packaging and all the rest of it, and you've got tons of money, then yeah, buy an audiophile pressing. But don't go buying these really expensive pressings thinking that you're going to get, you know, £100 worth of better listening experience, because you won't. You know, your ears will not hear the difference. Your eyes might hear the difference because you've paid more, therefore that must sound better. But, you know, when in doubt, you want A Kind of Blue by Miles Davis, you can pick that up for £3 anywhere. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed this little chit chat, and I will be back for more practical videos coming up. I've got all sorts, various television repairs, amp repairs, computer stuff, and even the odd unboxing video. So anyway, thanks for watching this. Got anything to say, please leave some comments, and I'll catch you on the next one.